In this video, we're going to look at date objects and string objects. Let's start by talking about date objects. So far, the objects we've used a lot of times, like number objects and string objects, we haven't had to do anything special to create them. That's because numbers have primitive types and strings have primitive types, but dates do not have a primitive type. Much like an array. So we saw in previous chapters, if we want to create an array, we have to create the array object using something like new, and then saying that the type of object we want to create, and then we store that in some kind of variable that references it. So for the date object, to create a new date object, we can do new and then say date, and that calls the constructor of the date class and creates a date object. And then we're storing a reference to it to today. Now, the reason we use that constant today is because when I say new date with nothing in the parentheses, it looks at the system time on the computer it's running on and creates a new date. And the other thing to remember about dates, it doesn't include just the date. Although that's all we're going to talk about in this particular series of slides right here. But date actually contains the year, the day, the month, and the time in hours, minutes, seconds, all the way to milliseconds. So date contains the date and the time is probably the best way to think of that. Let's look at some methods of the date object. Once we've created this date object like today, I could call today.toDateString, and it'd give me a nice readable version of that date. I can call today.getFullYear, and it gives me the 4-digit year. I can call get date, and it gives me the date of the month, like if it's the 17th or whatever. And then I could say get month, and it returns the number of the month. One of the things you want to remember about number of the month is that it is 0 numbered. So when I say get month, January is 0, and December would be 11. And so we could do something like this: create a new date, and call up some alert boxes, today.toDateString, today.getFullYear, today.getDate, today.getMonth, to pull out the different parts of the date. All right, let's look at some methods of a string object. So a string object is a string, and we don't have to use the new keyword to create a string object. We can just use a string literal with quotations around the string. One of the properties we can get from a string is its length. We could also use some methods that are built in, and we could say index of, and then we tell what we want to search for in a string, in the position, and it starts at that position and looks through it, trying to find the item that we put in the search position. If we leave out the position, which we can, it will just search the entire string. Again, strings are numbered. Just like an array, each character starts out numbered item 0, item 1, item 2, and it'll tell us where in that string that particular character or string of characters is found. We can do a substring. It will start at a certain position and get the next however many characters we specify here, and we'll see some examples down below. We can also say sub-str works differently than substring. Realize that if you've programmed in other languages, substring works slightly differently every time we do it. JavaScript actually has 2 different substring methods. One is sub-str, where we give it a starting position and a length that we want to pull out of a string. The other one is the full word substring. We give it a starting position and a stop position. We also have functions that will convert the entire string to lowercase or convert the entire string to uppercase. So let's look at some examples down here. I have a name. I set it to this string, Grace Hopper. I assign that to name. And then I can say, here's a constant called name upper, which is the name Grace Hopper switched to all uppercase. And I store that in name upper. I can also get the length of the name. So it's going to take Grace Hopper and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it'll get 12 and store that in name length. I could also do something like index of, and in this case, I'm saying, hey, tell me the index of the space in this name. And since each item is numbered 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this would return the value of 5 because the space is located at the 5th index of that string. And then I can also do name dot substring. Okay, this is substring. And I'm saying from 0 through the index in this case. Well, the index was this space I got right here. So what this is going to do is take Grace Hopper, and it's going to give me the items from 0 up until that space we found, and it's just going to pull out the name Grace. So we're using this substring to pull out the first name. So we've talked about a lot of different objects. We talked about the global window object. We talked about the document object. We've talked about text box objects. We've talked about number objects, and we've looked at method chaining, which is a method of combining all these different methods of these functions into one long line that does multiple things using method chaining and chaining. We looked at the date object, and we looked briefly at string objects. And then we talked about constructors that for dates, because they don't have a primitive object associated with them, we actually have to use the new keyword and call their constructor. In our next series of videos, I believe we're going to start talking about functions, JavaScript functions.